Everyone take a deep breath and let it out. All right. I know it's been a long day, and you're here, and I'm so happy to be here with you. I've been fighting the flu myself and for the last couple weeks, and I was so determined to be 100%. I'm about 85% tonight, but I'm so happy that I'm vertical. And that it's such a beautiful night and that I get to spend some time with you. So you have lots of things on your chairs. One of the things I want you to make sure you have is pull out a pen or a pencil, or make sure somebody near you does, because there's a survey at the end, and there's a little quiz that's on there that we're going to fill out at some point, all right? And there's no right or wrong answers on either of those, so don't get stressed about that. So good, my clicker is working. All right, so hopefully what we're going to do in the next hour and a half is I want to make sure that you guys understand more about growth mindset, but also about the developmental asset framework that Project Cornerstone is based on. Talk a little bit about adolescent brain development, and then really sort of strengthen our network of parents and community. And I appreciate CHC so much for creating these opportunities for all of us to come together. So Project Cornerstone, some of you may be aware of us, some of you clicking through, okay. It might be new to some of you, so I'm just going to do a really brief overview here. Project Cornerstone was launched in 1999 by several youth-serving organizations in Santa Clara County, and it became part of the YMCA of Silicon Valley. So our service area is from Redwood City down to Gilroy. And people who are familiar with what we do, they think this happens connected to other YMCAs across the country, but we're very unique to our community here. And what Project Cornerstone is about is trying to change adult behavior so that we have better outcomes for youth. So we're a youth development organization, but we're actually really focused on how adults connect, engage, support, role model, and help kids achieve their best potential, all right? And I love this. One of our volunteers put together this meme of sort of describing what we're all about, which is that we want to encourage all adults to be who you needed when you were younger. Sort of carry that out into the world. So the model that we're based on is called the Developmental Asset Framework. And these are kind of hot off the press. This is this brochure that's on your chair, opens up into a poster. It's very big, all right? So you can take this home, you can look at it more closely later. I just wanted to make sure you had the full list of the framework that we promote. So the developmental assets are it's a strength-based approach that was created by the Search Institute. And back in the 1990s, they really wanted to look at, instead of sort of a problem-based approach, they wanted to look at a strength-based approach. So for the kids that were completing high school, for the kids that were pretty much staying away from drugs and alcohol and achieving a certain level of success, what was present in their life that helped them achieve those results? What could we learn from their environment, from their experiences? And then how do we try to replicate that so that more kids have that in their life? So the framework that they created is called the Developmental Asset Framework. And usually when we talk about assets, we think about a car, a house, a bank account. And what this really is about is like the emotional bank that every child, every person kind of needs in their life. And the way the framework is set up, they came up with 40 developmental assets. I wish they'd come up with fewer, but they came up with 40. And the first 20 on the list are connected, they're the external environment that a child is functioning in. So if you look through the list, you're going to see that they're broken into categories of support, empowerment, boundaries and expectations, constructive use of time. It's things like families first in a child's life. Not every kid wins the parent lottery. And the role of neighbors, extended family, schools, churches, sports leagues, sort of all these spheres of influence in a child's life are an opportunity for them to connect and engage with other adults, positive peers, have a chance to really explore what they might be interested in, find their spark. So all of that is the environment that a child is growing up in. All right, so the first 20 assets are those, and those are very foundational. The second 20 are the internal assets, a commitment to learning, positive values, social competencies, and positive identity. So when a youth is growing up in an environment that's rich in those external assets, they're internalizing the values that they're learning through those experiences. And so when you look at the list, you see things like caring, integrity, healthy lifestyle, cultural competence, resistance skills, self-esteem, sense of purpose, all right? And what the research has shown is that the more that youth have of these 40 developmental assets, the more likely that they are to exhibit the thriving behaviors of helping others, valuing diversity, having good health, succeeding in school, leadership, resisting danger, delaying gratification, and overcoming adversity. But ultimately, what it's really all about is the resiliency that we're trying to build, right, for all youth. We wish that we could sort of put a protective bubble around our kids and that send them out into the world and nothing bad will ever happen to them. But we know that's not how life works. So through these environments, role models, and experiences that a child has, hopefully they're thriving, and then ultimately they're building that resiliency so that when the bad things do happen to them, that they're able to seek help, have caring adults in their life, that they're able to get whatever support they need, and that ultimately they're able to integrate that, learn from it, and move on in their life. So the formal definition is that developmental assets are the positive values, relationships, and experiences that youth need to thrive. And they're created through moments in time. It's not a one-shot deal, but it really is a journey that the child is on. So those early childhood experiences are important, leading into their school-age experiences, leading into their teen experiences, and into their young adulthood. So the research that we have done, this is all based on social science, and we have done 4 surveys now in Santa Clara County to measure how our youth are doing. And these surveys that we use have been used nationally by millions of youth across the country. So it's really interesting for us to look at our own reports and to see what's happening within Santa Clara County and then what's happening within different schools and school districts, and then look at that in comparison to the national data. So this slide here is showing that the more assets that a child has, the more likely they are to be doing better in life. And I'm going to show you a couple of slides more about that. So the first time we did the survey was back in 1999, and the most recent one was in the fall of 2016. So the 7th graders in 2016 had over 23 assets that were measured. 9th graders, 20.8, 11th graders, 19.6. And if we go back a slide, you're going to see this 21 threshold, that the youth that have 21 or more of the developmental assets are the ones that are really going to be okay and then ultimately thriving. So when we look at this, we're excited because our 7th graders across the county are over that 21 threshold. Our 9th graders are close to it, and our 11th graders have shown a lot of improvement. But why do you think that trend line sort of goes downward? And if we added our 5th graders, which we also surveyed, they were at 26. So why do you think the trend line kind of goes down? What are your thoughts about that? Puberty, I heard.
Have more freedom, they go out and exposed to more things.
Kids have more freedom, they go out, they're exposed to more things. Stresses.
More peer pressure.
More peer pressure.
Parent pressure, maybe?
More parent pressure. Yeah. What are people's attitudes about 5th graders in general? Elementary school kids. They're cute, right? They're not always, but yeah, they're pretty cute, right? Elementary school kids are in usually one classroom all day. You know, they're pretty cute. What are people's attitudes about middle schoolers, teenagers? What was that?
I said torture. No.
Torture with a laugh, yes. What are, and not this room, but what are the general public attitudes about teens?
It can be challenging.
That they can be really challenging, right? Why do they act that way?
Hormones?
The hormones, right? The teenagers have a lot of hormones, right? So there's a combination, I'm sorry, and confusion, yes. As adults, we're often confused by teen behaviors, and then by teens, they're often confused by their own behaviors, right? So there's sort of two things, a couple of different factors that are coming together during those middle school and high school years. Yes, puberty is happening. Yes, hormonal changes are happening. And in general, society has an expectation that teens are going to separate, push against, rebel, and that they're difficult. So kind of at a time when we need to be holding them a little bit closer, we're allowing them to push away, or we're pushing them away ourselves, right? And then they're also becoming much more peer-oriented during those middle school, high school years. They're much more family-oriented during the elementary years, and then they're becoming more peer influence during the middle and high school years. So, and you'll see that in these charts here. I mentioned that we did survey 4th, 5th, and 6th graders, and so when we look at this pie chart, you know, about a quarter of the kids in elementary school are in that less than 20 category of being vulnerable or at risk with their risk behaviors. And then it's almost 50-50 with the middle schoolers and the high schoolers. Okay. So this connection between assets and risk-taking behaviors, I mentioned that the kids that have more than 21 are the ones that are more likely to be successful and are the ones less likely to engage in risk behaviors. So this slide is showing the sort of orangish tower here, and you've got these charts in your brochures that are at your chairs. But we just sampled a couple, there's 24 risk behaviors that were measured in the survey. So we just sampled a couple here of using alcohol, hitting or beating someone up, skipping school, feeling sad or depressed. And what you'll see is the orange is the kids who have 10 or less of the assets are much more likely to have engaged in these risk behaviors. And then the yellow, gold are the kids with the 11 to 20 level of assets. And then it's really pretty small, the kids that have 21 or more. And then the flip side of that is the thriving behaviors of succeeding in school, helping others, valuing diversity, and overcoming adversity. The blue and the green are the kids with 21 or more. And you'll see that their towers of reporting these strengths are much, much higher. What I like about like this valuing diversity, helping others, overcoming adversity, you'll notice that there's a lot of strengths in those kids with the 11 to 20 assets in their life. And so when I look at this, I'm like, what's it going to take for a child? They're answering all these questions about the adults in their life, the activities they have, the opportunities they have, the risk behaviors. What's it going to take for one of those kids to sort of flip up to the blue level, right? Which adult in their life is really going to make a difference? What after-school activity is really going to make a difference? And I think that's something that we really try to promote, is that there's a lot of strengths in every child. And so how can we be reaching out and connecting with the ones that are more at risk so that they're more supported and that they do have better outcomes? So I want you all to sort of time travel a little bit, or for the teens that are in the room, you can think about your peers maybe. So I want you to think about a decision maybe that you made or one of your friends made that you maybe regret, have difficulty rationalizing. Sort of reflect back on that. And then the second question here is, any observations of teen behavior today that's kind of puzzling to you? So let me kind of open that up. Does anybody want to share an observation today of behavior today that's kind of puzzling to you? Or do you want to share anything that you might have done when you were a teen yourself, that when you look back on it, you're like, oh, what was I thinking? Tide Pods?
Why are kids eating them?
Why are kids eating them, right? That's a puzzling behavior. That's a trend right now. What else comes to mind for people?
A total absence of reasoning from time to time.
Is this your own reflection from your own teen years?
No, of course not. No, it's
not hurt.
So a total lack of
Reasonable usually. Sometimes it's just there's no arguing. It's just you can just give up and try again tomorrow.
So the sense of reason kind of comes and goes. Yeah, and that can feel really puzzling because at one moment you have an interaction that is very mindful and present, and then later one that just is befuddling, right? Much like the Tide Pods, right? Okay.
Sense of time, not knowing how much time has passed or how long they have been in the shower, for example.
So the sense, so teen behavior that's puzzling to you is their sense of time. You give the example of length of time in the shower. Any others?
I think they know it all. They know everything.
Now, is that you when you were a teenager?
No, that's an observation.
An observation, that they often will carry themselves as if they know everything. And I would say that, like, for me, I was that teen that knew everything, and nothing bad was ever happening to me. You know, anything that was bad was going to happen to someone else. And so I know this is being recorded, but my parents are both gone, so I can say it out loud. But, you know, at my high school graduation party, driving drunk down a canyon in Utah, right? Like that, I have no rationalization of why I thought that was a good thing to do. And I'm so glad I'm here today to be able to share that with you. And I would be horrified if one of my children did the same thing. But at that moment in time, when I was 17 years old, I thought nothing bad could ever happen to me. So I think it's important for us to sort of time travel a little bit back, remember some of those things, and then to see what we're observing around us too. You wanted to share?
Another thing is that although they have this sense that nothing bad can happen, they don't have a sense that there is something beyond today. And how you let them know that there's much more than just the moment, and that to really be successful, they need to have a broader view about what their strengths are and where they're going, not just the canyon, whatever. Right.
So it's not only just the sense of nothing bad will happen, but often they don't have a sense of this future that is awaiting them, right? So how do we help them have a sense of this future without stressing them out tremendously, right? And I think that's one of our struggles in Silicon Valley right now when we look at a lot of the data that came from the Project Cornerstone survey, from some public health data that's been gathered. Anxiety and depression is just on the rise, really on the rise in our community. So there's a lot of factors at play there that we need to be mindful of. So yes, that there is this brighter future, and how do we understand that? How do we communicate that? How do we inspire towards that without creating a great degree of stress? Is I think every adult and I think every teen is juggling with that. We have a parent of a 2-year-old here too, so she's taking copious notes. All right. So adolescence, right? It's something that kind of didn't exist to some degree a long time ago when we were a very agrarian society. When you were 12, 13, 14 years old, you were going out into the field. When we were a caveman society, you were out on the hunt, right? And you had adult responsibilities. And when we were cavemen, you were only living till you were 30. So when you were a teenager, you were middle age, right? But things have changed pretty dramatically in our world. So what is adolescence? It is a period of time of transition and change from being a younger child into ultimately an adult, right? And often we want to label that a child who's 12 is now in adolescence because chronologically that's what makes sense. But that child may still be sort of not even really yet into their adolescence. They might chronologically, yes, but sort of developmentally where they're at, maybe they aren't starting to do that separation and transition. But roughly it is between the ages of like 12 and 18 and 19 years old, all right? And there's different stages of adolescence, and every culture, we're a very diverse community in Silicon Valley, and every culture has some different pressures and expectations and joys that are bound up with this time period. Now, there was a quote that I heard once, and I want to attribute it to Erik Erikson, and I'm not 100% sure that he said it. He was a psychologist that was published a lot in the 50s and 60s. But I love this quote, whoever did say it, that the work of adolescence is to reject the values that you were raised with and to create your own ideology. And as a parent, that's kind of painful to hear, right? Because here I am trying to be very thoughtful, very mindful, have a lot of developmental assets into the lives of my own children and the neighbors around me and the schools that I volunteer at. And to know that sort of the work that every child needs to do is to sort of look at that, examine that, and then separate from it, and then kind of pick and choose what they're going to keep and what they're going to carry on into their adult life. That's actually kind of painful. But if I can keep that in mind as I'm working with my own children and as I'm working with teens and with young adults, then their behavior makes more sense. And I don't overly personalize what they're doing. And what I have found in my own journey with my own children is actually having that conversation with them about what their sort of work and their job through adolescence is, has made it so much less stressful for both of us to go through, or for us as a family to go through. I remember when, so I have an 18-year-old, and when she was, I think it was end of her freshman year, I had just heard that quote. So we were talking about it in the car, and it was like this huge light bulb went on for her. She's like, "Oh, that's exactly what's going on, Mom." And she shared with me her friends. It wasn't her, but she shared with me her friends and how they were sort of pushing back against their families and how they were rejecting having to go to church every Sunday, or they were doing this or they were doing that, and how painful it was both for the children and for the parents. And she was mindful of that as their friend. And she's like, but if we can think about it this way, like it makes so much more sense. And I said, yeah, and if you and I can keep talking about this and understanding it this way, then as you are making your choices, like I can be supportive of you. So the one of the best pieces of advice I got is that as you're supporting your child through adolescence, there's not one big talk that you're ever going to have, but there's basically 200 one-minute conversations that you're going to have. And my joke with my now 13-year-old son, when I heard that line, I said, we're going to keep track of that on our whiteboard. Every time we have a one-minute conversation, and he was like, Mom, come on. But actually, again, having that language with each other about having one-minute conversations about tough topics has meant that when there's something I really need to talk to him about that might be uncomfortable, I can introduce it by saying, we need to have a one-minute conversation. And then I talk about whatever it is. And he knows it's not going to be long and that it's going to end and it's okay. And what I love is that he has adopted that same language with me. When there's something tough or difficult that's going on in his life, he's come to me and said, we need to have a one-minute conversation. And, it's been great to sort of have that shortcut way of communicating with each other. So I pass that on to you if that's going to be helpful in your own family in any way. One of the handouts that you should have on your seats is it's a Wall Street Journal article that came out in August of 2016, and it's kind of in this funky format. You can go find the original, the citation's at the bottom. Sue Schallenbarger wrote this, What Teens Need Most from Their Parents. But when I read this article, I was like, I need this article in a chart because I want to be able to look at this for when, my son was 11 to 12, so he was the very first green box. And now he's 13, so when I flip the page, the first part is describing 13 to 14-year-olds. Teens are susceptible to social stress at these ages. Parents can help decode peers' social cues and model healthy coping behavior like exercise or meditation. And then it describes for me the developmental stage. Parents should brace themselves for what is often a wildly emotional passage. Okay? I just reread this tonight when I was in the car before I stepped in. I go, oh my God, this has been my last 3 weeks with this boy. It has been a wildly emotional passage for him. And so then the next column is what the parenting response should be. So This is a time when there's a lot, he's very vulnerable to stress. I'm seeing that. So ways that I can help support, and family support is a stress buffer. So teens whose families provide companionship, problem solving, and emotional support are less likely to become depressed. I'm like, okay, right? Like I opened this article, I read exactly what I needed to read for what my last 3 weeks have been like with my child. So hopefully this can be a helpful little cheat sheet for you with the different ages and stages. But again, keep in mind that every child isn't going to fit exactly into one of these boxes because they're kind of on their own journey. But it may help you calibrate or go, aha, this is what's happening right now. All right? So as we've talked about, during the transitions of adolescent, there is all the physical, sexual, cognitive, social, emotional, moral, and identity domains that are all being developed for the child. It is a period of tremendous change that's happening both physically in their bodies and then also in their brain development. So when we were talking about some of the behaviors, right, I love this, sort of these questions. So is it normal? What do you think, that they're going to argue for the sake of arguing? Is that normal? Yes. Is it normal for them to jump to conclusions? Yes. Is it normal for them to be self-centered? Yes. Hence the shower lasting 30 minutes. All right. Is it normal for them to find fault in adults? Yes. Is it normal for them to engage in risky behaviors? Definitely yes. Okay. So I think as we're a teenager going through it ourselves, understanding that like, oh yeah, this is normal behavior. I'm not some outlier, but this is part of my job right now. And then for the adults in that child's life to understand, yeah, this is part of their job right now. And how do we know when what's normal then gets into sort of a danger zone, I think is the question that as an adult I often ask. And that's where some of the growth mindset behaviors we're going to talk about around asking for help and seeking support are really important for adults to practice as well as for the youth to practice. That none of us should be going through this alone. Our teens should not be going through this alone. And as adults who are caring and loving alongside the teens, we should not be going through this alone. So let's talk some about brain development, all those different physical changes that are happening. One of the ones that I get actually really excited about is how the brain is changing during this time period. And this is information that wasn't available when I was a teenager. This is information that now, because of our medical technology and being able to do brain scans, like they used to think that the brain was done at the age of 8, because an 8-year-old's brain weighs about the same as an adult brain. Okay? But what they've learned through all this brain imagery and scanning is that the brain is going through this, the first 3 years of a child's life are a really critical time of brain development. And that was a revolutionary idea back in the 1990s. And now it's just common practice. We get that. We understand that. That the number of words that a child hears, the languages that they hear, the exposure, the support that they get is really critical in the first 3 years. Well, we kind of get a second chance during the middle school years. The brain is going through the second period of a lot of growth and pruning and strengthening of the passageways. And so it's a pretty cool time, I think, in a child's life. And I think if they can understand what's happening with their brains, and as adults around them, we can help them understand that and we can promote it, then again, it makes the ride a little less bumpy for all of us. So what these images are trying to show is that the brain matures from the back to the front. Because the back of our brainstem area, is really like survival skills that we need, the sort of fight or flight responses. So that part in the back, because of evolution, if we were going to survive, that needs to mature first. And then it moves forward, and the last part of the brain, this very front part here, we actually need it all the way to age 24, is called the prefrontal cortex. And that's the decision-making, the rational decision-making part of the brain. It's the very last part of brain development that matures. And so, so through those critical, like we understand that for younger kids, but often with teenagers, because they can be so rational at times and then so irrational at others, right? We're surprised. But really, it's just because of the way their brain is developing that they do need that support, the guidance, the feedback loop as much as possible all the way up into their adult years, okay? And they really need to be given opportunities during those middle school years to be developing the neural pathways. Because what doesn't get used basically gets lost. So the opportunities to learn new skills, to practice math, to learn new sports, to do different things, like that's actually really, really important as part of their brain development and then their social and emotional development as well. So part of why I think it's exciting for middle schoolers to know this is that they might think that sort of like, well, this is how I was in elementary school and that's the way I'm going to be for the rest of my life. That's not true. Part of developing a growth mindset is very much understanding that your brain is growing, your brain is changing, and that even into our adult lives, like there are still opportunities to strengthen pathways and to continue to grow our brain. Connected with this is risk-taking behaviors. Okay? I mentioned earlier, if we think back to the caveman times, when back, you lived till you were 30, right? And when you were 11 or 12, 13 years old, you were going out on the hunt. Or you were taking a significant role in helping with the hearth in the home. So our brains evolved to equip us to go out and face those big challenges that were part of survival. And we don't live in that world anymore, right? So it's helpful. I love seeing this charted out, and I loved having the conversation with my kids as well about, so you're wired to take risks. We survived as human beings because you are wired to take risks. So what can we do about this so that you have a chance to take risks? And that the risks that you're taking are helping you mature and push yourself and learn new things, as opposed to sort of falling on the easier risks that might be around you. Often drugs and alcohol are the ones that come to mind, right? So one of my pieces of my sort of learnings that I had for myself and then pieces of advice that I like to pass along is that for those of you that have middle school age children, what opportunities are there in their experience in their summers or in their after school programs or in their school day where they have a chance to take a risk and try something new? It's really going to peak in those early, sort of bumps up in those early middle school years, and then it really hits a high point around 11th grade. For those of you who have high schoolers, and when you look at all the data, like 11th grade is a crazy time for a lot of school-age children. There's just a lot of stress and a lot of pressures, and they're wired for their maximum risk-taking at that time. So how do we build in opportunities for them that are going to be safe, that are going to create that adrenaline, that are going to create that feeling of competence and that self-esteem, and that I can do this, but again, do it in a positive way. One of the things that I did unintentionally when my daughter was in just as she was approaching middle school, we planned her summer, and she did like windsurfing and sailing camp and a theater camp, which were all new things that she had never done before. And those opportunities were awesome because it gave her this feeling of self-confidence and actually then made her an adrenaline junkie for the rest of her life now. And then with my son, he's a very different personality. So I had that conversation with him. Like, these are the types of things we did with your sister to help prepare her for middle school. What are the things that we can do with you that are going to push you out of your comfort zone? And one of the things I did unintentionally is I left him on a train platform in London by mistake. We were rushing from one train to the other, and I jumped on, and my kids stayed on the platform, and I got on the train, and the doors closed, and they don't open up again once that happens. They give me such a hard time to this day about that, but it was actually like the best thing that could have happened because they were ultimately fine. We were reconnected. There are things like phones now that work. It's not 1978 anymore. But this sort of moment of stress and pressure ended up creating this like, oh, we can take care of ourselves and we can figure this out. I wouldn't have intentionally done that, but it actually was like sort of this wonderful moment in our lives. So I want you now to pull out that little sheet with 4 questions on it. So this is your little quiz. And I want you to pull out a pen or borrow one from somebody else. And I don't want you to overthink it. I just want you to answer these 4 questions sort of quickly, true or false. All right? So I'm going to give you about a minute to do that. All right. What you're going to do when you have it done is I want you to crumple it up into a ball. Sort of put your hand up so I know you're done. So this is the fun part. What you're going to do is you're going to throw it somewhere across the room towards other people, not throw it at someone, but towards other people. And then you're going to find one and you're going to pick it up. All right, so we're going to mix up our answers this way. So you might have to stand up, look around, find one on the floor. This is kind of your stretching moment here. So you're going to open up the quiz that you have in your hand. So the first question on this quiz, for those of you listening at home, your intelligence is something very basic about you that you cannot change very much. Now, if the quiz that's in your hand says true, I want you to raise your hand. We have about 5 or 6 that say true. All right? So do you think that's a fixed mindset or a growth mindset about intelligence? Fixed mindset, okay? That's how I was raised. I was raised believing that you were dealt a certain deck of cards and that was your intelligence and that's what you got and you do the best you can with it, okay? So, second question, you can do things differently, but the important parts of who you are cannot be changed. If you have false on the quiz in front of you, I want you to raise your hand. We probably have about 2/3 of the room that have that, okay? So if it's false, you can do things differently, but the important parts of who you are cannot be changed. False is actually the growth mindset for personality, okay? That we do have, there's been lots of research done on this, we actually do have the potential not only to change our intellect and grow our intellect, but to change our personality as well. Again, this is totally how I was raised. All right, number 3, you can always substantially change how intelligent you are. If it's true, if the quiz you have in front of you is true, raise your hand. Kind of some different hands up. Again, probably 3/5 of the room. All right, and that's growth mindset, fixed mindset? Growth, okay? And then the 4th one, you can always change basic things about the kind of person you are. If it's false, the one that's in your hand, if it's false, raise your hand. Okay, probably have about 10 people. So that, if it's false, then that's a fixed mindset, all right? So this concept of mindset has been in our community now for a good decade and longer, and we're lucky because we have Carol Dweck, the researcher, who's been studying this for quite a while. She's based out of Stanford. And so the concepts have really infiltrated into our community and into our schools and are influencing the way our kids are being taught and hopefully are ultimately influencing the way that we are thinking about how we parent and how we are in the world ourselves. This idea of a growth mindset or a fixed mindset, Carol Dweck's book is called Growth Mindset. How many of you have been exposed to the book or seen her talk? We've got a handful of people. Okay. I do recommend the book. She's a researcher, a very academic researcher, and she wrote the book trying to make it more accessible to everyday folks. And I had a great moment in my family. My husband was listening to it as an audiobook and was driving the kids around, when particularly my daughter when she was middle school. And so she kept hearing about it and hearing about it and hearing about it. And so we had a pretty funny exchange one time because her algebra grade had not been what she wanted it to be. And so she put in a lot of effort, and she got help. And she went to the tutorial sessions. And so when her next set of grades came out, the grade had gone up. So I said to her, I'm really pleased with the progress you're making. Like, all that effort you're putting in is really making a difference. And I listed all those things that I just said of what she'd been doing. And she looked at me and she goes, I know what you're doing. I'm like, what am I doing? She goes, you're trying to give me a growth mindset. And I said, well, it's working, isn't it? Right? And I love that she was like calling me out on it, that somehow it's like this trick, this parenting trick. But I'm actually going to read a couple things because I want to make sure that we're like getting it in our brains the right way. So, like I said, I was really raised with a fixed mindset. So, children and adults who hold the belief that intelligence and talents are fixed tend to be concerned about proving their abilities rather than learning. So, they then interpret mistakes as threats to their ego rather than as opportunities to learn. And mistakes defeat their self-confidence, and they feel powerless to change. Children and adults with a fixed mindset tend to avoid challenges. They often avoid making a concerted effort in the classroom, on the field, in their pursuit of personal goals, fearing that hard work indicates a lack of ability or intelligence, which prevents them from reaching their full potential. So it's like this idea of having a fixed mindset, that this fixed level of intelligence, that if you're either inherently smart or you're not. And so I'm not going to risk it because I don't want to look dumb. So when I read this book, and when I read these words, I was like, oh my gosh, this was totally my childhood, right? There's so many things I never tried because I wasn't going to be good at it immediately. And I can laugh at that now and try to help my kids have a growth mindset, all right? So the growth mindset, youth and adults with a growth mindset, on the other hand, demonstrate the kind of perseverance and resilience required to convert life setbacks into future successes. They believe intelligence and skills can be developed through education and hard work. They want to stretch themselves and learn. Challenges are motivating rather than intimidating, as they present opportunities to grow their skills and intellect, enabling them to work towards audacious goals and achieve their full potential. And that feels actually kind of overwhelming, right? But this idea of trying to help ourselves as adults develop a growth mindset and helping our children develop a growth mindset, I think can be very transformational. Because I think as adults, we judge ourselves as we should know everything, right? We should be a good parent. We should, although all of you in this room are here to seek more knowledge, so clearly you're demonstrating your own growth mindset. But what we want to try to be reinforcing as much as possible in ourselves and in our children is how can you, if you encounter something that's new, that's difficult, that's hard in your personal life, in your work life, in your school life, well, what's the help that you need in order to deal with this? What's the strategy that you need to put in place? What's the effort that you need to apply? Who are the people that can help and coach you in order to help you unlock this? So I think those critical questions are really important for us to like integrate and to absorb. So this mindset can really have a profound effect on life choices and success. And I know a lot of the conversations around mindset are around academic success for children. But what I've seen over the last decade that I've been exposed to this, that it really does apply to how they deal with stress, how they deal with conflict, how they deal with exploring and being curious in life. So yes, a growth mindset can be very helpful in terms of academic success, but really growth mindset is going to be very helpful around life skills and life success. I want to show you just a really short video. So what does all this mean in practice? What does this mean in terms of how we talk and support the youth and the people in our life? So one of the things that I really want you to think about is the power of the language that you use in conversation and in supporting the youth in your life. So this is from Addison Elementary, which is a local elementary school here in Palo Alto. Some examples of a fixed versus a growth approach. So someone who has a fixed mindset might say, this is too hard. Someone with a growth mindset would say, what am I missing? Someone with a fixed mindset would say, it's good enough. A growth mindset would say, this may take some time and effort. Fixed mindset, I made a mistake. Growth, mistakes help me learn. Fixed mindset, I can't make this any better. Growth mindset, is this really my best work? And then fixed mindset, I'm not good at this. Growth mindset, I'll use some of the strategies that I've learned. So part of what is important to do is to, when you're talking and processing things, and think about praise in particular. So part of how I was programmed, and a lot of us are programmed, it's like, oh, you're really good at this. Oh, I'm really proud of you, right? Those are some of the things that just come easily because we want to support the people in our life, and that's how we kind of were raised ourselves, and that's what sort of comes naturally. So trying to help grow a growth mindset means that you have to change the way that you might praise or give feedback. So, I'm so proud of you. How could that be framed with a growth mindset approach?
We praise the effort they put into something.
So you want to praise the effort that they put in. I'm so proud of you. You've been really trying to work on this, whatever it is. Your practice is really helping.
What do you think about it?
Great question. What do you think about it? Right? Trying to get them to self-reflect, as opposed to like, I love what you've been doing. What do you think about it? Let's talk about this some more. What strategies did you use to help you with this? Helping them concretely reflect and articulate their process can be really, really beneficial and helpful to them. So part of what I personally have been trying to work on is that, anytime I'm sliding into sort of a stock phrase with praising, trying to add that reflection point in there for myself and for them of the effort, the help, the persistence that they've demonstrated. So I love this quote, just popped it in here. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. It was Henry Ford. So when someone's saying, I can't do that, well, you can't do that yet. Is that something you really want to learn? Let's figure out how to do it, right? So what does this mean? So again, the research of Carol Dweck, the research by some social psychologists in our area have really encouraged all of us to make sure that youth know about brain development, that's really important, that we help to promote a growth mindset for them and for ourselves, that we really want to try to discourage labeling too much. We want to open it up. We want to praise the effort, the strategies and progress, not just the intelligence or abilities. And the sense of trying to promote risk-taking and challenge. How can you challenge yourself, right? Like asking, being very intentional about that. But again, trying to balance that without too much pressure, right? It's all this balancing act that we're all trying to work on. So I have a couple of scenarios that we will not act out. It's too late at night to act them out. But let me just pull a couple and then we'll move into some questions and answers because I want to make sure we have time for that and time for you to fill out your surveys. All right, so here's a scenario. So, and this did happen. A mother attends a Project Cornerstone workshop. We do some sessions that are like 6 weeks long with a group of anywhere from like 8 to 25 folks that come. So she was one of the attendees. She sits alone and she doesn't engage with anybody else. So during a pair share, like where you reflect and talk with a partner, the facilitator ends up being her partner. And this mother shared with the facilitator that she's worried that her daughter is not social, that she keeps telling the daughter to go out and to join clubs. So let's think about that, Mom. So how is she exhibiting a growth mindset in that scenario? I saw a little head shake. I don't know, somebody's like, I don't think she has a growth mindset. She attended the workshop. Let's give her points, right? She got herself into the room, right?
She also thinks her daughter can change because although it might not be the right way to be more of an extrovert, at least she thinks that by doing things she can.
So she's believing that her daughter can change, right? And we may not agree necessarily with how she's approaching it, but yeah, she got herself in the room. She believes her daughter can change, right? And she's talking to somebody about it, right? So she's kind of seeking some help, okay? So there is some growth mindset happening. How is she exhibiting a fixed mindset? She's labeling her daughter by saying that she's not social. How else is she exhibiting a fixed mindset?
She's not modeling behavior for the daughter.
She's not necessarily modeling the behavior that she would like her daughter to have. She's also got the answer for her daughter, right? Because she keeps telling her daughter to go out and join clubs. So you're my staff person. What advice would you give to this mom when you're doing that pair share? What would you say to her in that situation?
I like have to work with her daughter to say, hey, what do you think would be, what do you like? You know, and maybe we're on, first of all, we're on together, so it's also not her just telling her daughter.
So coach her on some questions she could ask her daughter to help explore, well, what do you like, right? What are some, I'm just repeating it so that people later on, because you said it great. Yeah, to make it a partnership with her daughter as opposed to telling her what she needs to do and how she needs to change, but sort of opening it up and exploring it with her. Oh, and bring it down to some smaller steps because it might be really, really overwhelming, right? The daughter's probably pretty similar to the mother, right? Any other advice that we might offer her? Let's do another one. I have 4 in here. I don't know which one's going to come out. So, all right, you guys. This is your final exam. You guys are going to be great on this one. Okay, so parent and child go to an open house at the middle school. Okay, the science teacher tells the parent, "I've been meaning to contact you all year. Your son is amazing. Quality of his work is the best I've seen." So how would the parent, let's put yourself in that parent's shoes. Let's give a fixed mindset response to that teacher in front of the child's there too, all right? So this teacher's gushing about the child, oh, amazing, quality of the work's the best I've ever seen. So what would be a fixed mindset response that that parent might give?
Just so proud of you.
I'm so-
I'm so proud of you. You've always been so smart, right? Yep. What would be a response that would promote a growth mindset in that situation?
Do you have any suggestions for improvement?
Do you have any suggestions for improvement?
The level of effort you're putting is showing.
The level of effort that you've been putting in is showing. Sorry, I kind of went, oh, the pressure's on now about other suggestions, but you know, praising the effort, right? That's awesome. So, you know, the response very well could be, yeah, I'm really proud. That's so great to hear. I'm really proud of how well my child has done. He's been putting in a lot of effort, and it really is showing, right? Because the child's listening and hearing that. And so, yeah, we want them to be able to receive it, but also not to get labeled or fixed that, oh, it's all supposed to be easy for me, right? All right, let's do one last one. All right, another middle school one. So ever since 8th grade has started, Tom is coming home every day looking mundane and lost. When his parents ask him how he's doing, he promptly answers, I'm fine. And he avoids further conversation. So the parents assume everything's fine, even though this kid is really quiet. And when they check his grades, they realize that he's failing. So they're not failing, sorry. They realize that they are falling. His grades have been falling. So the parents scold him, and Tom's response is to just shut down even more. So let's put ourselves first into Tom's shoes, all right? So what do we think's going on with Tom? Or how could we explore that? Let's maybe put ourselves in, let's think about Tom, and then let's also think about those parents. So what advice would we give to those parents in that situation? Yes?
Probably be more supportive and don't tell them like, oh, you're not doing well, but tell them you can improve.
So instead of, so you really want those parents to be more supportive and to focus on, instead of saying, you're not doing well, instead of saying, you know, we really think you can improve. Let's think about this together. All right? I like that advice. Yes?
I'm on the same idea, but ask the student, like the child, how do you think you're doing in whatever that subject is? How's it going for you? And then invite a conversation.
So instead of approaching it from a scolding perspective, try to open up a conversation. So let's talk about history or whatever the class is. You know, how do you think you're doing? Tell me more about what's been going on. Okay?
Really depends why he's behaving this way, because if they have asked him and he doesn't give any information, it could be because he's scared of his parents, or maybe he's just really lazy and knows if he tells his parents he'll have to go to tutoring and he doesn't want to do it. So there are lots of different...
There's lots of different ways. Your point is a good one. There's lots of, we don't know, right, what's going on because we're just, but it could be that he's afraid of his parents. It could be that he does need some support and he needs some tutoring. So, yeah, how can the parents try to unlock this? I think is one of the real challenges. You had some advice in them.
Because
No, go ahead.
I kind of like similar because there's a million situations. So I think the parents can reach out to the teacher who in this subject was someone I ask him or her what really happens, or because they cannot get any information from the kids, so maybe they can go to the school to have some information, and his classmates, his best friend, to get more information from them too.
This is a great growth mindset coaching approach. I like this a lot. So your advice to the parents is, okay, you're not getting information from the child, so you need to seek help and more information from the teachers, from the school, maybe from his friends, right? You all need help. So where can you find some help and find some more information? Yeah, so I like that one. Yes?
Oh, I kind of disagree with the asking their friends part, because I think at that point it's kind of just embarrassing to know that my mom would talk to my friends about why I'm failing. But I also think that the parents should be more approachable and like let the person know that they can always talk to them.
All right, we have great advice and feedback here. Don't go talk to the friends. You don't want to embarrass your child even more, right? I think that's really good coaching. And she's the one with the 2-year-old, so she's taking notes. It's good you're the expert in the room. Yeah, really trying to explore, trying to be more supportive, right? These parents are scolding, they're jumping to conclusions, they're only focusing on the grades. There's maybe some other stuff going on, right? If we go back to that Wall Street Journal article, there's probably a lot that's going on, right? That the parents need to start, and the grades may be the symptom and the most visible. So what's the pathway to getting to the root is really important, but do not go ask the friends. Okay, yes, one more piece.
I think the parents might be pressuring the student. Like, I think I might have already said this, but like saying, "Oh, why are you doing so bad? Like, you should get good grades," and not being like, well, having a supportive mindset.
So I love this advice about the parents really need to come from a place of support and less from a place of judgment, right? We only have, this scenario was written actually by a teen from Palo Alto, and she was drawing on a case study of somebody that she knew. So she knows more, but this is all she wrote for me. So we got to work with what we got. But yeah, like the parents, what comes across in this is that the parents are being really judgmental, and that they really do need to focus on being more supportive and seek help, I think is really important. So we have about 10 minutes left. I want to open it up for any questions that people might have or reflections that you might have at this point. Yeah.
I have a question regarding, the whole notion of the mind not a fixed mindset is that the child has to put a lot of effort. It's very easy to throw their hands up and say, "Oh, I'm horrible in math, and I'm never going to get good at it." So praising their effort is one way of getting them, but how, if they're really like, I'm never going to be good in math, how do you change that? And that's the most difficult thing that, I'm personally facing.
All right, asking for the wisdom of the room here. Yeah, we want to try to praise effort, but when that child's getting to a fixed point where they're saying, I'm never going to be good at this, particularly around math, what are some thoughts about how to sort of unlock that for the child? How can we switch that into trying to cultivate a more growth mindset approach? Yeah, I think that's a great question.
Really thinking about math, and that wasn't just an example. It's a book.
No,
by
it was
Joe
truly
Bo-
math.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's another book that's really. I went to Los Angeles for a talk with Joe Bowler, and her book is, I think, called Mathematical Mindset, right? So there's the whole crowd drag theory put onto math, and lots of studies of how people who started really slow in math, exceeded.
So a book referral around a mathematical mindset. So the two of you will connect at the very end and share the. But yeah, I think that's a great question. When you hit up against that roadblock with your child around I can't, I won't. How do we help to sort of flip that into I will and I'll try? I think is the root of the question here.
I would probably challenge my child to put a small thing and see the result of, this one quiz that you're having coming up. Just concentrate on that and then see if that makes a difference for you. And it's amazing how little by little things change and in the right direction.
So the advice here is to try to, whatever the roadblock is, to try to break it into smaller chunks, right? And then what the smaller challenge is that hopefully they have more success with and they put some effort into, then you help them gain more confidence from that, as opposed to the big label of I'm not good at all of this. Well, let's look at this piece of it. Actually, when you practice this, you do get much better at it. So let's work on that for a while and then shift over to getting more complex. Yeah.
Maybe set your mind to it you'll do great.
Yes, trying to build on small successes, I think, is really important, because they get stuck, right? Other questions or reflections? Yes. Or advice? Yeah.
Yeah, I know mindset is very important, but sometimes a very good tutor is also very important.
Yeah,
Because,
yeah.
someone can explain
Yeah,
the problem
yeah.
very simple. Someone maybe go out a lot, but the children still don't get the point. So maybe somebody find a really good.
Yeah, so that already, the tutoring had already, she's just like, regardless of the tutoring.
Oh, okay.
That is good advice. Like part of the growth mindset is getting help, right? This is a really difficult challenge. Let's get help on this. Let's try to, again, try to break it down. Let's get support. Let's try different strategies. And I think often we need smaller goals to help us work towards the bigger goal. And that's a real important life skill. I think that all of us can help youth in our life build. Any other question or reflection? Yes.
So at the beginning, you mentioned the 40 characteristics.
Yes.
How was it measured for the people? How do you judge this?
Okay.
Person has this.
Great question. All right, so the question is, of the 40 developmental assets that we talked about at the very beginning and that are in the brochure, how are those measured? And so there's a long survey that the students are given. It's like 150 questions that ask them a couple of different ways if they have this present in their life. And then from that, it all gets tabulated and compiled and then measured to, yes, they have this developmental asset, or no, they don't. And that survey instrument is very beneficial and helpful. But as a parent, I'm not going to give it to my kid. I'm not going to give them 160 questions, then try to figure it all out. But part of what I would encourage you to do is that poster, it's actually an interesting conversation starter to have with youth in your life, to say, okay, so these social scientists, they've measured this, how many of these do you think you have? Because it actually doesn't matter if you think your child has it in their life, it's if they believe they have it. So you may think that they have a positive relationship, communication with you as a parent, but they may say it's different, right? Asking that, sort of having some of those 201 minute conversations that are framed around that is one strategy. Of that list of 40, and we added a 41st, positive cultural identity, but of that list, I basically just want you to remember 3 from it, okay? So ideally, we want every child to have 5 caring adults in their life. Hopefully 1 or 2 are in the household. And that's a really good question to have with your kids at different points in their journey. So if I'm not around, who are you going to talk to? When you need help or support, who do you trust? And part of what I intentionally do is expose them to and build relationships with an array of caring adults that I trust. But I can't actually choose that Girl Scout leader is the one they're going to choose. But if I have great, hopefully good teachers, good neighbors, good Girl Scout leader, whatever it is, that then my children are going to trust and connect with those. So 5 caring adults is important. Having high expectations for every child is really important. At the beginning, when they were talking about the framework for CHC and how all youth can be successful, right? That's a really important mindset for us all to have. And when I say high expectations, I don't mean that everyone's going to go to Stanford. That's not what I mean. But that every child can really reach their full potential. To sort of have that approach and how you're interacting with youth, I think is really important. The third thing is that they have an opportunity to engage in activities that will help them discover their spark. What is it that gives them a sense of joy, purpose, passion in life? What's going to get them excited to get out of bed in the morning? Especially when they're 13, right? And you don't know what that spark's going to be. That's kind of what's hard. I wish we just, we could give them the survey and we would know. But it's only through exposure and opportunities, and then their spark may be something so different than what you thought it was going to be. But then how do you support it, and how are there caring adults in their life that are helping to nurture it, is important. So if you can keep that in mind, of like that concept of 5 caring adults, having those high expectations, and then help them discover their spark, and have constructive use of time is part of that. If they're always on their phone, or if they're always gaming might be their spark, but being online all the time is not going to actually help their spark really flourish. There has to be a balance. So of the 41, sort of shortcutting it to those 3 would be part of my advice. Thank you all so much for your time and positive energy.